Love proudly. This is a conversation on how the legal system impacts equality and pride. And in celebration of pride across various markets, we're glad that you joined us. And during this conversation, I want you all to meet Bill and Robert. And they're going to share their personal story. And they're going to reflect on the legal milestones that shaped their marriage inequality. And they're going to discuss how the legal system continues to impact LGBTQ and individuals and families today. It's an opportunity to hear firsthand from people who lived through these significant moments in legal history. Bill and Bob were the first couple to be married, not one of the first, but the first couple to be married when same-sex marriage became legal in Orlando, Florida. And they're going to share their story. And we are honored that both of you are willing to do that. And I just want to give a brief bio. Bill was born and raised in a small rural town of Montgomery, Illinois. Bill came out to himself in 1982 at the age of 21. Bill has worked full-time since the age of 15, and he worked for Bell Labs in Illinois for 20 years, where at one point in his career, he held a government top secret clearance. We're going to have to hear about that. After massive layoffs at Bell Labs, Bill decided to move to Florida in December of 2003. Bill and Bob met in 2008. They purchased their home together in 2010, and Bill has been working for the city of Orlando as a commissioner's aide since 2011, making him the longest serving commissioner's aide in Orlando's history. Robert, his partner in crime there, was born in Portsmouth, Virginia, and as a son of a U.S. Navy serviceman, he spent much of his childhood traveling through the United States. Robert has lived in Virginia, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Florida, and California before moving back to Florida as a young adult in 1986. He then graduated from Romare Academy of Style Masters in 1988 with his license in cosmetology. Robert opened his own salon, Styles in downtown, Hairstyles of Downtown, located downtown Orlando in 1991, where he's been located at the same location for the last 35 years. And he has worked full-time since the age of 15. So welcome, Bill and Bob, and thank you again for being part of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So we have some questions that we're going to ask, and we're going to just have a conversation, basically how the legal system impacted your life and your story. So let me start with you, Bill. Can you take us back to the beginning when you came out?
Okay. I was raised in a small town in Illinois. There we go. A small town in Illinois of less than 3,000 people. So it was a very small town mentality. And I knew from a young child that I was different. I just didn't know how I was different. Then as a teenager, I dealt with, you know, the attraction toward, other men, other boys. But then also I was also had a fairly religious grandparents. And so I was trying to fight it for a while. But at 21, when I was finally it was the legal age to drink in Illinois at the time, I was finally able to go to Chicago, a much larger town. And so that's when I was like, okay, this is it. I definitely knew I was gay at that point. And so, that was when I came out, was at 21. But it was hard because I was from a small town where everybody knew everybody. So that was when I came out.
Thank you. Bob, can you tell us, what was it like coming out for you?
Mhm.
I, being young, I never understood what it all meant. I knew at like 5 years old I was different than my brother, but I don't know if I ever put a title on it until later in life. I don't ever feel like I ever came out, but I never felt like I was ever in the closet. But I just kind of lived who I was. So that was a little different for me and Bill. And my never, my parents were just okay with who you were, it wasn't an issue for them. So, but became an issue, you're in high school and I was being who I am. I was gay bashed in high school as a teacher held me down and three students beat me up. Things like that were kind of awakening for me to go through something like that and not to go home and be able to say, Mom's like, who broke your nose? And I was just saying, oh, it's just a fight. But you knew if you said something, then my mother would go deal with it. And it would just make it worse because we had nothing to protect ourselves. We didn't have any alliances. We didn't have any groups or the internet, and where you can understand it. You just kind of you hid things that happened to you instead of coming out because it was just easier.
Thank you for that. And we're gonna be talking about alliances and how important the alliances in helping the community, throughout this discussion too. Going on to the next question, and I'll start with you, Bill. So how did you two meet?
Well, when we met, we were both just out at a bar. So we were out at a dance bar, and so we met like straight couples meet. You just see each other, you smile, you start up a conversation, and it's just like any other couple. We just happened to meet out at a bar.
And when you met, were you introduced to each other or you just met?
Yeah, we just introduced, or he introduced himself to me, and we just started talking.
Oh, thank you. When did you decide you wanted to build a life together?
That was different for both of us.
Okay, we're gonna start with you, Bill.
I want to hear Bob's answer. Let Bob answer.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I was not, I was about 7 years out of a 15-year relationship that was hard for me to deal with. And I was finally had my life where I wanted it. And I really didn't want another relationship. I just wanted to have fun and, so like, I'm not serious. If you're serious, I'm not interested. You want to have fun, we can have fun, but it's just how it was for me because I didn't want to. Every time I felt like I would pick the same personalities, even though he's different than I ever dated before. So, but I was gun shy.
Yeah, that's true.
What about you, Bill?
And for me, I always had a rule that I had to date someone for at least a year before I would make any decisions on if this is somebody I want in my life for long term or, anything like that. So, it was, by a year, I definitely knew that this was somebody that was going to be in my life one way or another, probably for the rest of my life. So, yeah, and that 1 year is when I then proposed to Bob and asked him to marry me, which was not legal at that time.
And that was how many, and just giving us a timeline, when you proposed and decided, just you wanted to make a life together, how many years prior to when gay marriage became legal in Florida was that? Give us a timeline.
So we met in 2008. I proposed in 2009, and same-sex marriage became legal in 2015.
Okay.
So
And that was
we had
Florida.
a stance of years.
Yeah. So Florida became legal before federal.
Yes, it did. Yeah, we were really surprised that it did become legal here before we federally got recognized. and we, like the night before the wedding, so the courthouse, the clerk of courts had us come in at 6:30 in the morning before the office opened. Because we had a pending lawsuit, if they put a stay on it, to sue the county, I guess it would be the county.
The clerk of courts.
And so they were just playing nice, had us come in at 6:30 in the morning, snuck us into, like, we lawyers go through, which we seen the line of people waiting to get their license, and I felt a little guilty about it because we heard that some of those people were there since 2 o'clock in the morning. And we got in there before the clerk's office opened, everything was done before they even opened the door.
Wow. Well, take us back, and when we were talking about the fight, you mentioned a lawsuit. When did you decide this is something you were going to fight for? So take us back there before the courthouse, when you actually got married.
Okay. So we had decided we were going to go, we thought Florida would be the very last state to ever get same-sex marriage. So Bob and I had decided we were going to go to Washington, D.C., because
Okay.
they had it earlier, that state would marry couples. So we decided we were going to go out of state and get married. And then when it looked like it might actually happen here in Florida, we thought, oh, they may talk about it, but there'll be a stay put on it. There'll be all kinds of lawsuits. It'll be held up for years. Um, but then Florida has just decided, no, we're going to go ahead and allow that in 2015. And in January, they were going to allow it. So I work for a city commissioner, and she got a call from a lawyer who said, from the city, who said another lawyer is looking for two same-sex couples to go to the county clerk and try to apply for a license, marriage license, and then get denied. So that way it can be fought in court if the clerk of court had the right to issue the license on the very first day, which was going to be January 6th of 2015. So my boss, my commissioner said, hey, they need two couples. Would you and Bob be interested? And we said, sure. So they had us and then a female couple. And so on Christmas Eve in 2014, we went to the courthouse and we went up to the window and asked for an application, and they said we were denied, and that's what the lawyer needed, just that to happen, so that way it could go to court, have a judge decide, and make the judge rule that the county could issue same-sex marriage license in January when it became legal.
Wow. And what was that like in that environment?
It was scary, but it was exciting. It was one of the cool things is when we went to the courthouse, they have like the little tickets you pull, like now serving number blah blah blah, like at the deli. And the number that I pulled was 106. And I turned to our lawyer and I said, "Oh, this is a really good sign because 106 would be January 6th, the day that it was supposed to take effect."
Okay.
So I was like real hopeful, but we were also really scared. We were really scared all the way up until, I mean, we were always scared until January 6th. Even that night before, we didn't sleep. We kept watching the news. We kept expecting, some stay or some ruling to come down that would halt it, until it could be fought a little longer in the courts. So it was nerve-wracking. It was exciting. It was scary. It was all of those emotions all at the same time.
Thank you for that. The fear at the time, did you know what you would be fighting for as far as generations to come and for the community as a whole?
Yeah, I think it was more for everybody to have the right to marry who they love, no matter what the sex is. And to have that legal, contract that gives you the right. If Bill was in the hospital, I can't see him unless his family gives me permission to see him. We worked around that with our state attorney to make me his medical surrogate, but we had to
Affirmative
do,
action.
yeah, we had to do all this legal, stuff to try to make sure that we did have the rights to make decisions for each other. And we already were domestic partners in the city of Orlando, but if you were out of the city of Orlando, it didn't count.
Right.
So if something happened when we were away, or, that was really strong just to have that. When you go do, if you're buying a house, you are doing anything, to have that, just say, hey, you're married. And we don't share last names, but it always amazes me now. We just say we're married and nobody questions it, because I was like, we're going to have to carry our marriage certificate around for the rest of our life, but nobody ever questions it. Oh, okay.
Well, thank you for that. So so in other jurisdictions are, buying a house, estate planning, other things that, rights and privileges that straight married couples enjoy. How is that different, or how has that evolved, since you were legally married? I'll start with you, Bill.
Well, that's the thing. Before we were legally married, we had to absorb the expense of going out and just trying to get some of the rights that people had as being legal spouses. And like Bob said, we had the medical set up, we had the house set up, we had estate set up. But all of that was at our expense and, working through a lawyer. And there were couples that were, especially younger couples and new couples that just didn't have a couple $1,000s to put out to do all that stuff,
Mhm.
And then when it became legal to get married, and then you automatically get that, that's amazing because then you don't have to jump through that extra hoop and you don't have to go through all those legal channels to make sure that, you know, if there were families that didn't get along or didn't like the spouse or whatever, they might try to step in. But once you're legally married, you know, then it's automatic that it goes to the other person. Or like with me, I had a pension from Bell Labs because I was there for 20 years. So my pension has a clause that if I were to pass first, Bob would get a certain percentage of my pension only because he's my legal spouse. If we weren't legally married and if that was not an option, that he would not get that same right.
Wow. And thank you for that. And Bob, how about you?
I was always fearful because we'll go back. I had a friend that passed away, and his partner, they just bought a condo together before marriage was even, and had a car, and then he suddenly passed away at 39 years old. And I just remember Rodney, his partner, telling me, hey, the father that never was a father to David showed up at my door this morning. And he said, I want his car. And are we going to sell the condo? Because half of it's mine. And this was a guy that never participated in his son's, having a relationship with them. And then but he was entitled to it. But they just bought the condo and there was no equity in the condo. So Rodney just told him, hey, half the mortgage is due on the first of the month, and actually your son's car is not in his name, it's in my name. So, but things like that, it hits in your head, somebody could just come walk through here and take our stuff,
Yeah.
and make sure, you had to make sure everything's written down properly. But that's what good attorneys do.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for that. So we have in the fight for both of you, and I'll start with you, Bill. What does it feel like right now to be among the first couple to be the first couple in Orange County and among the first couple to be married in Florida?
I mean, it was great. I mean, it was a privilege and it was great. And we also happen to live, even though we're in Florida, we happen to live in this bubble that is very welcoming and accepting, Orlando and the Orlando area. And actually, after we received the marriage certificate from the clerk of court on January 6th, we then went to City Hall where they had a public wedding of 50 same-sex couples that got married on the front steps of City Hall by Mayor Dyer, our mayor, and our Commissioner Sheehan. So it was amazing. It was exciting, and it's great because a lot of times Florida is not the most progressive state, and so we are very lucky to live in this bubble that we live in this area.
Yeah. So the fight, now we have the meaning of it. And now that you're on the other side of that milestone, how has your relation evolved through everything since then? And I'll start with you, Bob.
I think it's just, I don't know, I just feel safe, and, going back to our wedding day, it's probably not like it was a lot going on because we were the couple. So the media, the news, we were mics, and we did all that not for us. We did all that to get the attention out there for our community. But it took away from our day in a way because we were, you were just like interviewed and, it just took away from our day and that. But you just feel safe, you feel whole, you feel like you're important because you have this right. And then some people feel by us getting that right, it took a right away from them. And I don't get it. They're like, you have more rights than I do. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So I just love to have that safety, that security. It might be a piece of paper to some people, but it means a lot to us.
What stands out to me, what you said is you feel safe. And that gave me goosebumps when you said that. And Bill, how about you? Where were you after that milestone?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is pretty much the same as Bob's. It's just, it was amazing. It was also a little bit of a pressure because now we were the poster children, for same-sex marriage, in Orlando. And, I heard people say, not people that were friends of ours, but people say, oh, well, they should see where all these couples are in 5 years or 10 years, to see, thinking that the divorce rate would be higher, because, gay men can't stay together or whatever that they had preconceived in their minds. So there was some pressure, when you're the one under the spotlight, but we had to do it. We just had to do it for everybody, not just us. I mean, honest to God, I did not think gay marriage would happen in my lifetime. If you would have told me that as a 20 or 30 or even 40 something, gay man, I would have said it's not going to happen in my lifetime. But it did, and it was amazing. So I guess that's it. There's pressure, but it's just having that, like Bob was saying, it's having that security. You have all the same legal rights. And that's all we're asking for. We're not asking for special rights or different rights, just asking for the exact same rights.
Equal right, yeah. And even when we first got our license here, if we went to Georgia, we went to other states, it didn't matter. They didn't recognize our marriage. So federally, it wasn't recognized in the beginning. So having that federal, when it got recognized nationwide, was huge because that gives us our federal rights. Or if he passes away and leaves me money, I don't have to pay taxes on it, because we're spouses. There's little loopholes, and that's how it became nationwide. There was a married couple in New York that her partner died, left her millions of dollars. That's not happening here, but
No.
and she got this big tax bill, and she's like, "Whoa, whoa, no, I'm married. We've been married for I think it was like 15 years in
Yeah.
New York. We shouldn't have to pay this bill." And they're like, "Well, it doesn't matter. We federally don't recognize." And
Wow.
that's what took it to the Supreme Court. And because we shouldn't be in a couple if money's left behind, if it goes to your husband, wife, or well, your spouse, your legal spouse. So that was important then, you know.
Yeah, that's such a great point. When we're talking about the legal fight as well as the culture, the community, there's a lot of nuances of being married versus a straight couple versus a gay couple, and taxes, money, estate planning, your power of attorney when if you're sick in the hospital. These are things that these are just rights, and that are just for the equal for everybody to have. And their next question, getting back to the meaning of what you were fighting for, what you're standing for. There, the LGBTQ rights are still being heavily contested today. It's like another chapter. It's some steps backwards, forwards. What do you think of the progress that you've seen of where the things stand today? And I'll start with you, Bill. Put you on the spot.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've already mentioned was that I didn't think gay marriage would actually happen in my lifetime. Well, that's amazing. But at the same time, there's always stuff backwards too. You know, there's always states fighting it, or people fighting it, or people trying to take some rights. But um, I think we've come a long way. I mean, when Stonewall riots happened in 1967 in New York City, people could be arrested just for being gay. So think of that happening all within, my lifetime is pretty amazing to where we are now. To all of our neighbors know us, they know we're a gay couple on the street, and there are other gay couples around. Um, but it's not a big deal like it was, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So in a lot of ways, we're on the right track. It's just we always have, you know, checks and balances, and we always have setbacks and progress.
Well, thank you for that. We're going to turn to our audience, and we're going to get any questions from our participants here. Um, and basically for the audience, just want to throw some prompts there. What do you wish someone had told you earlier in your journey? And what do you say to a younger couple navigating a similar fight? And what does love proudly mean to you? And I want to get some questions from our audience.
I'd say to anybody that's a younger gay or lesbian queer couple is that you're going to have wins, and you're going to have losses, and you have to keep up the fight. That is one thing, is you just have to keep at it, even though it may look like it's never going to happen in your state or in your town or whatever. You just have to stay at the fight. And the other thing is, you have to have a support network. You have to have your friends, your straight friends, your allies, your cheerleaders, the people that are there giving you strength when the wind just gets knocked out of you. And luckily we have that. Bob and I have that. We have supportive mothers, we have supportive friends. There's always people there that are cheerleaders for us, and they're in the fight with us too. And another thing I want to point out is, like, when we're out walking our dogs in the evening, um, we go by all kinds of houses. And during Pride Month, there are plenty of straight parents and families that put out a pride flag, or they'll put out the Orlando United rainbow sign in their yard sign. And so that means a lot to us. That gives us the energy to keep going and to keep up the fight. It makes us feel like, our community isn't as small as just us on our street.
Yeah.
So it really makes a difference when street people are right there. Or I have some friends that have little pins that they wear, and it says ally with the rainbow colors on it. And one of them told me she wears it on her purse strap. And she said, I was at the post office and somebody said, thank you for wearing that. And she was at the grocery store and somebody said, I love your pin. So, I mean, you have to have that network, you can't just live in
Yes.
your own bubble. You have to have that network and that support system.
And thank you for that. And that was our question from one of our participants. We have another one. What is the hardest thing you've ever experienced as a gay couple, and how did you overcome it? Start with you, Bob.
Oh my God, wow. I, wow, you caught me on that one. You got anything?
The
Bill
only
can take
story
over.
I have is the only story I have, and it's not as us as a couple because we've really we've been very fortunate as a couple, and the times have changed why we've been a couple. But before, when I still lived in Illinois and I was dating someone and he spent the night and he had a rainbow sticker on the back of his car. That's all it was. It didn't say anything. It was just the rainbow sticker. And somebody left a note under his windshield wiper and they said, you are not welcomed in this neighborhood and get out or we will kick you out. And so that I felt like we really had to fight. So I said, we're not going to just take that lying down. So we're going to call the police. We're going to tell them what happened. And we're going to see what the police say. And we're not going to say hate crime. We're going to wait and see how accepting the police are, because that's the other problem. You can call the police and, back in the day, and they were against the gay couple. So luckily we called the police and the police came and the officer, and the first thing he said, this is a hate crime and we'll figure out who did it and we'll take appropriate action. And they actually kept me posted on it. And they did find out who did it. And unfortunately, it was a neighbor that lived 2 houses over from me. But the police put pressure on them to stop their nonsense. So stuff like that still happens, and it happens more and more, especially in other places that aren't so accepting as Orlando.
And
Thank
I
you for
think
that.
like when we were buying our house, Bill's, I don't know if anybody can see, he's really tall, he's 6'3", I'm 5'6". So I feel like nobody puts us as a couple. We were buying our house before we were married. They go to him. Like I'm sitting at the table, but was being ignored because I wasn't a spouse. And for some reason, everybody's strong with tall people. It's more dominant or whatever. Which,
No,
that's the only thing I can think of as being tough. Every time we do business, it's like, we always put aside. That's all I can think of.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We have another question. I want to touch on our trans community also. What do either of you think of all the legislation across the country that infringes on the rights of transgender? Is it different? Is it the same? It's in that community, LGBTQ, but there's a lot of new movement against the transgender community.
Well, I think because of the alliances that Bill was talking about earlier, they're
Mhm.
kind of leaving us alone a little bit. And they're going now after the trans community. Trans community is our community, and I will fight
Yes.
for trans in a minute because they're just like us. Our brains are wired differently. You can say it's a choice or whatever, but I have a trans client and I've been going through he's started transitioning at 50, served his country 20 years, or she now, excuse me. And, it's like when she was referred to me to help her through this process. The big phone conversation was, I'm transitioning. Can you help me with this? I said, yes, I can. He's like, I will come after hours so nobody sees me coming to your shop. And I was just like, thought that was so awful for her to have to feel that way, that she had to sneak in my salon. She's a human being, that has made a decision. She is making her happy. She's finally happy after all those years. It's just the wiring of our brain. For some reason, God makes us one way or the other way. It's not that I woke up wanting to be gay, because I surely did not. It was hard. But you're wired that way. I always say, like, some people like blondes, some like brunettes. It's your brain is wired already. And I think trans people are wired that way. Did I understand in the beginning? No. But they're human beings and we will fight for them.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to just touch on, we have another really, really good question. And before we get to allies, let's really talk about the ally, because everybody can be an ally, but then, when we talk about allies, it's the straight community. But we have a good question from somebody who's part of the LGBTQIA community. And this person is saying that they know they're not straight. They don't feel like there's a specific label, but and I'll read the rest to you. I don't feel like I'm part of it, like I'm not gay enough. How do you two navigate that feeling? And do you ever deal with something similar? And how do you find where you fit? Or how did you in the past or even today?
Yeah. I think for me, coming out of my 20s, there was a big deal. I mean, gay men were one community, lesbians were a whole other community. Then in my 40s, I used to help facilitate a coming out group for men that especially lived in the western suburbs of Chicago, small towns that were just coming out. And so at that time, I think by then, over those 20 years, it had changed where it was gay lesbian, you know, that was more of the community. And now the community is completely inclusive. And so, you know, I think I understand their point is they don't feel like they fit, like they're not the G and they're not the L. But you're still part of the whole community and the whole community as a whole. And so, you'll find your niche, your little niche, and and as you get older, it's not as important to think, what group am I part of, or what group do I hang out with? Because most of our friends are straight. I mean, we don't we don't have a huge, gay social circle. Most of all of our friends are just straight couples or straight people. So look, lean on them for the support if you can.
Well, thank you for that. Another very good question, and this actually is from my other nephew, Aaron Lewis. How can we address the racism that is present in the LGBTQ community? The Black community already struggles to accept members of the LGBTQ community, but the Black queers are also being treated differently from their queer white peers. I know you both are white, but does this question come up with the racism that's within the community?
Well, I don't think it's just in our community, it's everywhere.
Right.
In
Well,
the
that's, I
last
mean,
couple
I'm
of
sorry,
weeks.
that's what the question meant. I'm not, I don't
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because the Latino community is that way. When Pulse happened,
Mhm.
here and those people died, there was bodies that the parents would not come get their child's body because they were gay. And it's just awful when you think that's your child, no matter who they are or what they are. And yeah, I don't, it, we got to break that bridge in all communities to get everybody together. And I think the more we separate, which I think today's life, they want to separate everybody and hate each other. And for some reason, we got to figure out a way to break through that because, we're better when we're whole, when we're our community, everybody's community. If we come together, we're stronger, we're better.
Thank you for that.
That's a hard question, just so I can go back to
Yeah,
that for 1 second. It is a hard question because, as you pointed out, we're both white, but when I was a young child, my aunt who was white married a black man, my Uncle John, and they were married until he recently passed just a few months ago. And so they talked about how rough it was for them, even just holding hands in public, because they got married in the late 60s. And so
wow.
that's when people didn't marry outside of your nationality, your religion. There were so many things that were put on society. And I think it has to change over society to then filter into our community. And it's unfortunate that it happens because at this point in life, there's some of everybody in most of our lives, and especially in our families.
Well, and that's a great segue because I want to go back to the ally. What more do you need from allies? What more can we do? And then I want to ask about kind of looping back to, the legal profession. Can what can be provided to the gay community from lawyers? Like what is needed out there? So let's start with the allies first and then the lawyers. What can we do?
I think just stand up. We have October, we have our Pride Parade downtown here, and what's the group called? The Parents
Well, P-Flag.
P Flag, it's called, and it makes me so emotional to watch these parents carrying signs. My daughter's trans, my son's gay. Can we give you a hug? And
Mhm.
that's parents standing up for their children. And the more people hear something that's not right, you need to, even you're straight, you need to defend us. You need to defend that everybody should be treated equally, and I think just standing up for us and showing up, and voting right. People need to vote and you need to read before, don't go on Facebook and decide who you're voting for. Read about them. Yeah,
I love that.
learn
That,
who
that
you're voting for.
I love that. That's a soundbite. Don't go on Facebook to
Yeah.
decide who you're voting for. And what about you, Bill?
I think the same thing. It's just having allies that are willing, you know, to be with you on these issues. Like Bob pointed out, P-Flag, which is Parents, Friends of Lesbians and Gays, they're always in the parade. We have straight friends that take their kids to the parade. That means a lot to us when we hear that, you know. And one thing that I do want to point out is that most of the time, if you're and I'll say queer child because queer just encompasses everyone in the
Yeah.
LGBTQIA plus community. But when you're a queer child, you're a minority within your own family. So if you're African American born to African American parents or Hispanic born to Hispanic parents, and you're called a racist name on the playground as a small child, and you come home and you tell your parents, they tell you how to deal with it, how they dealt with it, what it was like. They comfort you. As a gay child, if somebody called me a sissy or a fag or a queer, I certainly did not go home and tell mom and dad that's what happened because that would be a whole different conversation. And I would have felt like that would have put me underneath, the spotlight. That would have brought the focus on me. So you're born as a minority into your own family when you're part of this community. And then when you do come out to your family, you know, most of us are lucky and we have really accepting families and they're our support system, but there are people that are, disinherited from their own families, and that's just awful. So being an ally and being out there and saying, I love folks, or having a rainbow, sticker, or having something that says ally with a rainbow on it at your desk, on your car, whatever, that really goes a long way. That makes the little kid that's thinking about, he may be your nephew, maybe your cousin, whatever, somebody thinking about coming out, they're going to feel like you're the first person I could tell because you are an ally.
Thank you for that. This is so enlightening. My brain is rushing with more questions, and we have some more great questions. To the legal community, what can, what services, what needs from the legal standpoint can we offer? Like, for example, in the various jurisdictions, now that it's legal federally, we have estate planning. There's also, of course, with marriage, and some gay couples are still with they're still doing the domestic partnerships, adoption, things like that. It's just so different if you're gay. What more can the legal community offer the queer community?
I think one of the answers to that is that you can't just offer those services, by putting an ad out and saying, hey,
Mhm.
we do, gay adoptions or whatever, because people don't know who that person is. If that person is volunteering at a gay drop-in center, or they're doing something else, or they're running ads in a gay newspaper, or some type of thing, or they're part of a gay business association, even though they're not gay, they can still be a part of it. And then people
Right,
realize, okay, they're part of our network. These are safe people to go to, because I'm not just going to
right.
go to a lawyer who just wants to make money by doing this. I want to go to a lawyer that I know shows up for my community, that I'm going to
Mhm.
feel comfortable going to, and is not going to, just be there to make the sale. And that's for everything. That's for realtors. That's for you name
Absolutely.
it.
And that goes back to that ally where you feel safe. And I want to close with first, is there anything else that both of you wanted to add to this conversation? What does love proudly mean to you?
That's a harder one, because it's just, to us, it's just everyday life. It's, you know, our love broadly is just living our authentic lives and having everybody we know around us know that. And it's not like we're trying to flaunt it in anyone's face. We just want to be recognized as a married couple,
Right.
and we don't have children, but we have, adopted dogs and cats that are our children. So, love proudly just means be who you are, and, being upfront about it, and then having that support system that is there for you as that same-sex couple.
Yeah, you got to be comfortable with who you are. And I'll be honest, when we first got married, it took me a long time to use the word husband when I was introducing in business. So,
Really?
like, if Bill came in the salon, I had a client sitting there, and I kind of know how they are about certain things. I wouldn't use the word husband. Oh, this is Bill, where Bill was like right off the bat, oh, this is my husband,
Mhm.
but I wasn't living my true self. So now I am, so it's easy to say now. But in the beginning, I was kind of still guarded, keeping that guard up.
So when did that change? It just gradually changed?
It gradually changed,
Yeah.
and then I realized most people that come to me, they already know who I am, because I don't really
Mhm.
hide it. I have a rainbow thing on my station, so it's not that I hide it. And that was a client bought me when Pulse happened, where I have the rainbow strings there that I put up after the Pulse accident. And it just changed. Or I had a client come in and she was referred to me a few years ago, and she was like, she goes back upstairs to the law firm she worked for, and she was like, "Hey, Colleen, did you know Bob was gay?" And she's like, "Everybody knows Bob's gay. He doesn't hide it." So things like that. It's just, but the husband thing, it was a word I had trouble using in the beginning, and then it just comes out now. It's comfortable because, you're always protective. You're always trying to,
Sure.
keep that part of your life.
And I'm on the
Well,
opposite end of the spectrum. I waited my whole life to use the dang word. I'm using
You,
it. You know my husband? My husband works here. This is my husband. Oh, that picture, that's my husband.
yeah, if I go walking through City Hall, people stop me. "Oh, I know who you are because, oh, on Bill's desk, there's pictures of you." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
we have a really, really good question, and thank you both for that. That it's again, it's enlightening, and I appreciate that. Um, Both of you work in, like, you talk about on the other sides of the spectrum. Um, you, I would say that you, Bill, work more in that office corporate. You know, you have your own hair salon in the one of the biggest buildings downtown Orlando. But how can the workplace and employers be better and be better allies for the community?
Can I say one thing? When I worked for Bell Laboratories, we had this program. It was called Safe
Mhm.
Space Magnets. It was a pink triangle, which is what they used in
Okay.
concentration camps for anybody that was gay. The pink triangle. So you take the power back by, using that
Wow.
symbol. It was a pink triangle with a green circle around it. And it meant anybody that had this little magnet, it was just small, little square magnet, the safe space magnet hanging on their desk, it was safe for you to talk about your relationship or who you were with that person. So I think people, they look for little things, or you walk into somebody's office, you look for something that says this person, might be open and accepting, and maybe
Okay.
it's they have the American flag and the Canadian flag, or they just have all kinds of flags, but they also have a pride flag. Then I'm like, okay, they're cool. This is not going to be an issue for them, So um, there's lots you can do, or you can just go out and you can buy the little ally pin, and you can put it on your
Hmm.
lapel. You can put it on, whatever, and it just tells people, that you're an ally and it's okay.
So that comes to that ally. You said the word safe again. So
Yeah,
it's basically communicating to each other through a flag, a pin, just something that says, you know what, you're safe here. You're safe here. You're
right.
seen, you're heard, and you're safe here with me. And I love that. And for me, I want to strive to be more of that. Getting a pin, getting the flag.
We'll get you, Pat.
We'll get you a pin.
Is there okay? um, is there anything else? This is your platform.
I guess one other thing I forgot to mention, when I worked for Bell Laboratories, I had a job that I had to have a government clearance for. And it was going to be a top secret government clearance because I worked for Bell Labs that did research for the phone company. And we were working on
Hmm.
an emergency system. If our country were to ever be under nuclear attack, we'd have a way for the president to communicate. Um, so, I mean, that's all I can tell you about that. But when I was
Were you
first
gonna
put
have to
in for
kill
the
me?
job, they said you're going to have to go through this, quite extensive background check, and they're going to ask you all
Uh,
kinds of questions about your life and your personal life and who you've
yeah.
dated and blah blah blah. So I called a good friend of mine who was a lesbian who was with the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms um, branch, and I said, "Hey, this question's going to come up in my interview, and so how should I answer it?" And she said, "I can't tell you how to answer it, but she said you know, if you say no, you may pass, but if they then find out, then you're out because you're a liar. And if you
Right.
say yes, you may not get that level of clearance because you are out. And this was, in 84 or 5. So I just decided I was just going to be myself. I was going to say, this is who I am, because I knew they were going to do a background check and come and talk to all my neighbors and my coworkers. And everybody knew me at work, knew I was out. And I was living with a boyfriend at the time. And so it came to the interview, and they're going through the questions. And I don't know what happened on this interview, but that's the one question they forgot to ask me was, "Are you gay?" And so it just never
Really?
came up. But I was ready. I was ready to say, yes, and I have no problem with that. If I don't get the clearance because of
Wow.
that.
That's interesting that they didn't put the that question on there.
No, but they came and talked to all my neighbors who said, yeah, he lived with his boyfriend next door. So
Well, love the name of our um webinar here, I think says it all. It's Love Proudly, and how the legal system impacts equality and pride. I think that you answered a lot of our questions, and even from our audience, and just loving proudly. I think that it's a complete sentence. So we
and
will have this available, this webinar available on the KPC website, and we also have uh, the CLE available. This is a complimentary CLE, and if there's nothing else, I think we can. Um, we just want to thank you both. This was enlightening. This was fulfilling. This was I, I just can't say enough. The questions were amazing, and I did touch on all the questions. So thank you all for the participants. And if there's anything else, we want to wrap it up. And everyone, enjoy your day. Love proudly. Be an ally. Be known that you have allies, and just have a great day. So thank you.
thank you. And none of this would be hot. None of this, our relationship wouldn't be possible if it weren't for legal decisions.
Yeah.
So it's, if we didn't have the legal right, it'd be a whole different ballpark. So we're glad we're speaking with lawyers and people that are in the legal profession, because none of our rights would be here if they weren't a legal right.
Well, that's another thing I just want to add. Thank you for being the trigger to get the courts involved. When you first with that application, because that's what did it. You have to get the courts involved. So, well, thank you.